And we're back in the car on a murderously, ridiculously hot day here in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. A discussion that I would like to have with you all. It is a discussion, a question, a problem, a quandary, an imponderable. Because there is no right answer or right answers to this. It depends on how you yourself answer the question. So there was a clip from at least a year ago when Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger sat down with Harvey Levin to discuss their careers, the rivalry they had back in the day, the kind of deep friendship they forged when the rivalry was over. And Harvey Levin asked a really good question. He said, okay, who would you guys put on your action hero Mount Rushmore? And Harvey Levin then said, you guys got two of the slots as far as I'm concerned. So give us the other two. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not so sure that I'm putting Sylvester Stallone on the action movie Mount Rushmore. It's a matter of how you look at it. Again, this is very important. There are levels, there are layers to this question. But if we just go off of this interview and Harvey Levin, and most people I think would actually right away put Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone as two of the four action hero, action movie superstar Mount Rushmore. So if we start with Arnold and Sly, who gets the other slots? And Levin looked at him first, and it didn't seem as if Sly wanted to answer. Levin got the idea that Arnold was ready to jump in with his thought. And so Levin said, well, what do you have? What are you thinking, Arnold? And Arnold immediately says, well, it's got to be Clint. It's got to be Clint. And then they show, a couple of pictures, a little maybe brief clip of Clint Eastwood. And because of the career that Clint Eastwood has had, especially since he seemed ready to be put out to pasture circa 1990, it looked like his career as a leading man was over. He'll continue to make movies and produce films, but he's not making any more balls out action movies as he moved into his 60s. Ironically, Eastwood's career just ascended and kept going up. But the reason why Arnold answered Clint, it's not just because Clint is Arnold's single favorite person in the movie business and somebody who he has always been open about the fact I idolize this guy. This is the guy whose career I kind of wanted for myself. And it's always interesting when you have people who have had impossible levels of success freely admitting to being jealous of other people. But the reason why Clint should be on the action hero Mount Rushmore, somebody had to do certain things first. And Clint Eastwood, he had the spaghetti westerns, and particularly The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's a top 3 greatest westerns ever made, and he plays what amounts to an action hero role as the man with no name. There's a lot of gunplay. There's a lot of large-scale action sequences in that film, but that's not really the movie that might get Clint onto the action hero Mount Rushmore, despite the fact that the 2 Oscars that Clint won, well, he won 4, but the 2 movies he won the hardware for, Unforgiven, a Western that's not an action movie. It has action elements, but it is most certainly not an action film. And $1 Million Baby, there's a lot of boxing, but that's also not an action film. But the original Dirty Harry, 1971, is a trailblazing, groundbreaking film in its own right. It is what? The first R-rated action thriller in the style of modern day. It's the first modern action thriller. And Clint was the right age, and you know what else Clint did? He did his own stunts in that movie. He did a stunt where he jumped off, and you could see it. The fact that you could tell that it's him is pretty cool. He jumps from the Larkspur train trestle onto a speeding school bus. And the studio did not want him to do that. They told Don Siegel, don't let him do that. We don't want to even think about insurance. He could die, whatever. But Clint, as only he can, and as only he was willing to do, Don, I'm doing it. So you can either support your star, me, I'm doing it anyway. You want me to direct the scene myself? Whatever he had to tell him. I don't think Siegel was really going to fight him on it. So I'm going to have Clint on my action hero Mount Rushmore, even though he's so much more than just an action hero, but he was a trailblazing presence. And if you look at his career, he made a lot of action movies, if we're being honest, of a higher quality than Sylvester Stallone. If we're just looking at it from the perspective of action movies, you look at the Dollars trilogy, you look at interesting action films like Coogan's Bluff, you look at the Dirty Harry series, and then a movie such as The Iger Sanction, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. Hell, High Plains Drifter has an awful lot of gunplay. You get my drift. Heartbreak Ridge, military film, but it's kind of an action movie. So then Stallone agreed. And he almost, if you look at him, he hadn't even thought of Clint, because Clint, not only the fact that he's 95, but your first thought of Clint Eastwood is not, well, he's an action star. At a certain point in his career, that would have been the first thing you said. Well, Clint mostly makes westerns and action movies of different kinds of action movies. So then when it turns to Sly and Arnold looks at him and Harvey Levin says, okay, Sly, it's up to you to pick the fourth guy. Who are you going with? And he thinks about it for a couple of ticks, and then he goes, oh, wait a minute, it's Bruce. It's got to be Bruce Willis. On the strength of Die Hard. But also Armageddon and the first two Die Hard sequels, which are fantastic. People would throw The Fifth Element in there. And, Bruce, the Jackal, Striking Distance, he made a ton of, if they weren't great, he made a ton of decent action movies. The Death Wish remake, when he was coming to the end, not good. So in the world of Harvey Levin, but we're going to give this to Schwarzenegger and Stallone, because I feel like they could have done the thing where they said, well, we're going to keep ourselves out of this. But if you want to say who are the four best action heroes, Arnold, Stallone, Clint, and Bruce Willis. That's what they all agreed on. They said, okay, that's our top four. Now, here's the problem. Where's Harrison Ford? Where's Tom Cruise? You could even put Kurt Russell up there. You could put Chuck Norris and just have him be the whole Mount Rushmore by himself, which is what I think the Chuck Norris memes would tell us. Jean-Claude Van Damme had a terrific career as a leading man in action movies, but you see the problem. I would say that Harrison Ford has a better claim than Stallone himself to be in the Mount Rushmore because of Han Solo. And you say, well, those are science fiction films. You're correct. But he's doing action hero shit. And Indiana Jones is a top 5 greatest character in the history of motion pictures. And the first 3 Indiana Jones films, to me, are all masterpieces. So I don't know. I don't think this is a question which can be answered, but it breeds fascinating arguments, conversations, discussions. And I hope that you all, chime in and give me, what's your Mount Rushmore? And I don't really have one. I'm just, we're just spitballing here. But Kurt Russell made great action movies. If you just look at his career, Escape from New York, Escape from LA, Big Trouble in Little China, Breakdown top 10 best action movies ever made. I'll say that here. Executive Decision, fantastic. Tango and Cash with Sly, fucking riot. Kurt makes the movie because Stallone plays the straight man in that film, and it's Kurt who brings the heat, as they say. He brings the fire. Hey, look at Seagal. I wouldn't have Seagal if it was a top 10. I don't think I'd have him, but he made a couple of really good action movies, such as Under Siege and the aforementioned Executive Decision. These are imponderables, and there is no way to quantify. But as somebody who is not a fan of the Rambo series, that's why I don't think Stallone makes my top 4. I don't have First Blood even. I don't even think I'd have it in my top 20 favorite action movies, and the rest of the films stink. Rambo First Blood Part 2, as I recently talked about, it's a riot, it's funny, but the movie's not supposed to be a comedy. It's not supposed to be a comedy, And he made a lot of disposable actioners in the 90s. Judge Dredd, not great. Assassins is just okay. Daylight is just okay. Demolition Man is terrific. I love Cliffhanger. But I gotta have Harrison, and I gotta have Tom Cruise. So a top 4, right? Think about Cruise. At least 7 of the Mission Impossible films, if we're being honest, are better than any individual action movie Sylvester Stallone ever made, right? I mean, these are just on the other hand, though, Arnold, Terminator, Terminator 2, Total Recall, and Predator. From the action movie perspective, again, no offense, I think they're better than any individual action movie Stallone ever made. I love Victory. Is that an action movie? I guess, you know. But if Tom Cruise and Harrison Ford are on the list, I'll give Arnold a slot. I think I can take Clint off. I could. Nah, I don't know. But the three for me who are locked in: Arnold, Tom Cruise, Harrison Ford. Who would be the fourth? I don't know. On a different day, I'll say, well, it's got to be Clint from the historical perspective. The fact that here's a guy who was doing his own stunts. He didn't do all of his own stunts, but doing a dangerous stunt that the studio said we can't let you do, and he did it anyway. It's all fun and it's all fascinating, and it really just gets down to this is purely subjective, because I know people who actually prefer, I shouldn't say actually because then I'm judging. There are people who prefer the Rambo series to, let's say, the Terminator series. And after the first two Terminators, they're really not, I mean, they're okay. Terminator 3 was okay. And Terminator Genesis, I thought, was very entertaining. It had its moments, you know, kind of putting a different twist on Terminator 2. It was okay. But I can't, I got to have Harrison Ford because of Indy. And some of the other kind of standalone action movies that he did, such as Witness. And where's Mel Gibson? Right? Martin Riggs. You could put Mel in there. I'd put Mel ahead of Stallone. And Mel didn't make any bad action movies. Payback is better than any of the Rambo films. So, like, it's all out there. It's all great stuff. I mean, Kevin Costner could even stake his claim to one of the slots if you want to go that route. But I think push comes to shove, I'm going Harrison, Cruise, Arnold, and Clint. I'm not going to put Mel above Clint. In this context, I'm going to say Clint. And if you want to say what are the movies that get them there, give us three. Well, for Tom Cruise, it's going to be three of the Mission Impossible movies. I'll say the first one. First one's not the best. Maybe it's the fourth or fifth. But the crap that he pulls, the crazy stunts that he does in the later movies, well, starting with part 3, that stunt that he does off the side of the building in Asia. Now, what the fuck? That's a stunt where Matt Damon told a story that he said when he had dinner with Tom Cruise right around the time of The Departed. I think it was after Cruise had finished principal photography. It's such a ridiculous story, but you know it's true because the way Damon tells it, he's not making anything up. So he said that, I think it was that he had just seen Mission Impossible 3, and he asked Tom Cruise how he did the stunt. This was 2006. Both of those movies come out the same year, The Departed and MI3. And Tom Cruise, Matt Damon kind of does a Tom Cruise impersonation. It's really good. You know, the kind of restlessness, and then he said he's so intense. He's talking about a movie, not real life, and he's right in my face explaining. I'll tell you, Matt. I'll tell you. So I knew what I wanted to do, and I showed the safety guy. This is what we're going to do on the shot. And the safety guy says, Mr. Cruise, we can't do this. We can't do this. I can't guarantee you're not going to die. There's at least a 22% chance that you're going to die if you do this stunt. Can't let you do it. Matt Damon, that he's kind of playing, looks around. So I said, Tom, well, what happened? What did you do? Tom Cruise goes, I fired the safety guy. I got another safety guy. That's how you do it. He fired the safety guy. Fired the safety guy. I can't imagine anyone else in Hollywood doing that. But part of it is because Cruise was a producer on the film. There are things that you can, quote unquote, get away with if you're the producer, that if you're just a hired gun, just an actor, you're not. In most cases, you're not going to get away with it. In the case of Clint doing his own stunt, jumping off the train trestle in Dirty Harry, he really wasn't in that much danger, but in theory, if he mistimes the jump, he could have gotten seriously injured. But in that instance, he had the relationship already with the filmmaker, Don Siegel. They were like already blood brothers. They loved one another. You know, they had a bond. They'd already worked together a couple of times. And Siegel was not going to tell Clint. He might have said, I can't let you do this, but he was always going to let him do it. So, yeah, Cruise, 3 of the Mission Impossible films. Harrison Ford, I'll give the first 3 Indiana Jones movies. And, yeah, Arnold, if you say what are the 3 best action movies or action-oriented, Total Recall, Terminator 1, Terminator 2. And Predator is like, you want to say Predator's tied for 3rd with with the original Terminator, okay, we can do that. But it is such a great question for me, and I always talk about myself being a Generation Xer. These guys were my heroes, cinematic-wise. These were my heroes growing up. Not so much Cruise in this context. I mean, the first Mission Impossible movie, I was already done with it's almost ridiculous. I was already done with my coursework at New York University. But I grew up watching Clint. I grew up watching Sly. I grew up, to some extent, watching Chuck Norris, but I was never really as into Chuck Norris, more later with the memes and stuff like that. But I was a big fan of Kurt Russell, of Mel Gibson, of Kevin Costner, and Bruce Willis. I love Bruce Willis. So there's no right answer, and I feel like if you asked 1,000 Gen X movie fans, let's say in this instance, people between 45 and 55, I'll give myself an out here, because 45 and 55 would have the same general range of at what point in their life would they have seen this film or that film. I feel like the top four, I think that it would probably be Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Bruce. I don't think that it would be Clint. I think it would be Clint if you're talking older people. If you go to boomers, then Clint's definitely going to make a lot. He's going to make a lot more lists for sure. But I don't know who the fourth guy is. The fourth guy might be Mel. It might be. It might be Mel. It could be Kurt. But I'm looking forward to getting your take on this great question. If you're an action movie fan, how would you see, what's your Mount Rushmore? This has been episode 578 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your viciously, violently, impossibly hot Tuesday in July here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.